Welcome in, everyone. I am Matthew Coughlin, the host of the Jabroni Hour, talking about all sports, but specifically today, we got our first NCAA football episode talking about week number 1 coming up in this season. Stay tuned for more episodes about MLB, NFL, NBA, NCAA, anything that you can think of, we cover on this podcast. So, without further ado, let's hop right into it. So the first matchup I'm going to talk about is on Thursday. They have a great schedule set up starting Thursday, getting to Friday and Saturday. And the first game I want to highlight is number 24 NC State taking on Western Carolina. Now the line comes in at 32.5 in favor of the NC State Wolfpack at home. Now I think this is a slam dunk for the spread in NC State's favor. They're playing at home. They're a ranked team. And 32.5, I think, is very doable for an NC State team that is looking for maybe a potential bid into the postseason. But they also have Grayson McCall, a transfer, started a ton of games in his career. And Western Carolina just really has no match for NC State. And I think it is a very good opportunity for a big-time get at 23.5. Now, the next game I would like to target is the Mizzou-Murray State game. And Mizzou-Murray State should be a really fun one. Mizzou's offense has been phenomenal the past year and in this offseason, and they are prepared to go on a big-time run and make the college football playoff behind Brady Cook. And then, of course, the receivers are quite phenomenal. Luther Burden should be a top 10 pick. And I mean, that's really all you need. But they also have Theo Weiss in there as well. He's going to be a senior this year. But that Mizzou offense looks phenomenal. And the game over is 57.5. And I'm going to go ahead and say that it's going to hit the over. I think Mizzou scores about 50 points. And I think Murray State pours in 10. And a 50-10 final, that gets you your over. I like Mizzou, Murray State. Now, a couple other teams to highlight in the top 25 that will be playing. Kansas gets Lindenwood at home. And that line is 45 points. Daniels is expected to play finally for Kansas. They don't have Bean to fall back on this year. They really need Daniels to be healthy. But we'll see if he can do that. It gets a nice and easy warm-up matchup against Lindenwood. And then one of the most fun competitive games of the Thursday slate is going to be UNC and Minnesota. It is at Minnesota, so they do open as 2-point favorites, but I can definitely see UNC taking this one. Right now, Max Johnson most likely will be the starter. The Texas A&M transfer, left-handed quarterback, could end up doing really good things in this UNC offense. But they also return a Marion Hampton, who has the potential to be in that Heisman race. Minnesota, I'm not always that high on Minnesota, and they lost a lot of good players last year in the draft. Their team is thin. It's a little weak at most positions. Their defense is not what it once was. I think UNC at +2 especially, I like them there. And then North Dakota State, Colorado on ESPN. This one should be awesome to watch. Should be a high-scoring affair. And this is an FCS matchup. Obviously, North Dakota State an FCS king over the past few years, taking on Colorado and Dion and Shador. This one should be fun. ESPN at 7 o'clock Central Time. You guys should definitely tune in. Now, I think an underrated game is going to be, and they have -3 for Jacksonville State. Coastal Carolina visiting Jacksonville State. Now, Coastal Carolina, of course, lost Grayson McCall, but this should be a good game nonetheless. Should be a pretty close one. And obviously, opening week, anything can happen. We saw FSU get down by Georgia Tech. We saw SMU struggle against Nevada after being massive favorites. Montana State, the FCS team, beating New Mexico. We had a lot of craziness in week 0. And then the last but not least, Utah, the number 12, playing at home against Southern Utah. This should be a slam dunk for Utah, and it should be really an important game for Cam Rising after not playing the better half of the last 2 seasons due to injury. Now, Cam Rising, I'm guessing, is going to play at a limited capacity in this game. The last time he played was in the Rose Bowl and against Penn State, where he threw for 95 yards and a touchdown and interception. He played well in the Pac-12 championship game in that year as well, but he is going to shake off some rust, and I'm not sure he's going to be there for the whole game either. Therefore, I like Southern Utah to cover at plus 38, but I am not really taking too many bets in that game. Moving on, we have Oklahoma and Temple. This is a Friday game, number 16, Oklahoma, coming in at minus 42.5. The game over is set at 59.5, so I actually think Temple will put up some points at Oklahoma. Now, Oklahoma obviously losing Dylan Gabriel is huge, and I don't know if 42.5 points is going to be enough to shy away some bettors who like the Temple upside here. Now, I don't think Temple's good at all, and I think they're going to get blown out. But I want to see what Jackson Arnold and this Oklahoma offense can do first before I do anything with them. Now, another fun one I think on Friday is going to be that 9:30 Central game, TCU at Stanford. I think this one has the potential to be a pretty fun one, especially in that Friday night capacity in that late window. Could be a really tight game. Now, Ashton Daniels returning at quarterback for Stanford didn't have the greatest year last year, but maybe you don't want to see what he has to offer first before you go ahead and enter into the fray with him, just because he might show nothing. No improvement from last year, and that's 11 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. Now, for TCU, I don't think they're going to be the best team TCU has assembled in the last few seasons. I don't think they cracked the top 25 at all this year. I'm not too high on TCU. Now, the one thing I could say about TCU is they are 10-point favorites in this game, so I guess Vegas does like them at least a little bit in this one. At Stanford, I actually don't hate it if you want to get the plus 9.5 on Stanford at home. And then moving to the Saturday slate to open up with Clemson at Georgia. And for me, this one is a slam dunk for Georgia at minus 13.5. I think the value is way too good for Georgia. It's a neutral site, but it is in Atlanta, so it's not too far from Georgia, their actual home stadium. And at 13.5, I think is incredible value if you want to go ahead and scoop up Georgia. The next one is Penn State at West Virginia. Number 8 Penn State playing an unranked West Virginia team. They are returning Garrett Green as their starting quarterback, but Penn State has a ton of returning players. Drew Aller in his second year hopefully will improve. They still have Singleton. They still have Katron Allen. The receiving core is maybe the biggest question mark on the offense, but they should be fine with their dual threat running game, especially carrying it. Julian Fleming, I want to see more of him. He's a senior transfer from Ohio State. Could end up being a pretty decent player. And then on the defensive side, you still have Abdul Carter, who might end up being a top 10 pick in the draft. For all these reasons, minus 8 for Penn State, I feel like is a very, very good gamble. And Penn State might actually be pretty decent this year. And with the expanded college football playoff, they really have a chance to make a difference. Moving on to the next game I like for fun is the 11 a.m. Central Time game between Virginia Tech and Vanderbilt. Now, this one actually should be a pretty fun one. Virginia Tech and Vanderbilt, two usually decent teams, and Virginia Tech opens at minus 13.5. Now, Vanderbilt has had their struggles in the past, but they have retooled their team quite a bit, and I at least like to think they'll be a little bit better this year than they have in the past. Virginia Tech minus 13.5 might be a little steep. Now we have another interesting one here, um, which might not have any implications at all, but it's Indiana State visiting Purdue. And this is a 33 favorites for Purdue. 33-point favorite for Purdue. I think that is a crazy number, just given what Purdue did last year and what they could end up doing this year. I don't know much about the Indiana State team and their performance against FBS schools. Therefore, I'm going to stay away from it. But I don't hate it if you want to sprinkle in a little bit, because in FBS play, last year, Indiana State played Indiana and lost 41-7. That's a 34-point difference. Indiana last year, I think, is a little bit better than what Purdue is this year. And at 33-point favorites, I don't hate it if you want to take it, but I wouldn't 100% encourage it. Number 15, Tennessee is going to be taking on Chattanooga, and that line is at 38.5. I don't love to pick the big favorites here, but I think Tennessee is a home run play, playing at home against a very weak Chattanooga team. Oklahoma State also plays at home, and this one's against South Dakota State. Now, this should actually be a pretty good game between a top 20 team and an FCS school. Now, Oklahoma State could actually be very good this year if Alan Bowman can throw the ball, because Ollie Gordon is going to have a Heisman-like season for Oklahoma State this year. But I don't count South Dakota State out of this game. This one could be a nail-biter. South Dakota State didn't lose a single game last season, and they really have the opportunity to show up here in FBS and beat a team like Oklahoma State, who's entering the season at number 17. Now, on the flip side, Oklahoma State could show their run dominance and end up winning this game by 12, 14 points. And if you want to see that happen, minus 9.5 isn't really too bad. One of the biggest lines in college football week 1 is Ohio State at home against the visiting MAC school in Akron. This line is 48.5, was all the way at 51.5 before being downgraded just a little bit. A lot of guys that I've talked to seem to like Ohio State to cover this huge margin. I don't know about that. I see 48.5, and I either say I'm not even going to touch it, or I'm going to bet the underdog. Now, obviously, I don't want to pick your stuff for you. Ohio State should be great this year. On paper, they should be one of the top schools. But Ohio State likes to fall flat recently. I'm not a big believer in Ryan Day. And I think overall, at 48.5, I think Akron has to cover. Moving on to Colorado State at number 4, Texas. This is a 2:30 game on ESPN, and Texas opens at minus 32. This is an interesting one. Colorado State could be sneaky decent this year, and by sneaky decent, I mean they could be a 500 team, I think is what they're going to end up being, in my opinion. But who knows, right? First game, maybe they're a little better than what they show. Maybe they're a little worse. The problem for me is Texas is coming in as a team that's already established quarterback play, and that for me takes it over the top. Quinn Ewers entering his third year at Texas in the same system, should be phenomenal. Now, the big worry and the big question mark is the running back scenario in Texas. With Baxter and Blue both going down for the season, that leaves them with freshman running backs and a pair of junior running backs that maybe get the bulk of time, or sophomore Wisner could. He had 12 carries for 73 yards and a touchdown in 2023, could end up playing a big role in the Texas offense this year. Now, at receiver, they did grab Isaiah Bond. They have Silas Bolden as well. I think those are two pretty decent pieces coming in as transfers, and they are experienced college football players. Bolden being a senior and Bond being a junior. They both played in big games. I like Texas here. 32 points isn't enough to shy me away. I still do like Texas. Now, one of the teams with the hardest schedules in all of college football is playing at home against number 19 Miami. It's another Florida-Miami game, and these ones are always a good bit of fun. Now, last year, Miami opened at Utah and did not look good and lost 24-11. They bounced back though and went into Gainesville and Tennessee, and they won 29-16 against a Tennessee team that ended up being one of the best in all of college football last year. And then they also played some tough teams down the road with a loss to Georgia, LSU, Mizzou, and Florida State. But I do think that Florida is better than a unranked team. I think they maybe should have snuck into the 23 to 25 range, but they're opening here at 2.5-point dogs versus Miami. I've never been a big fan of Miami, and Cam Ward to be the new quarterback actually doesn't excite me all that much. He is a pretty decent quarterback, but I don't think he's going to elevate Miami to a playoff team. Now, maybe they prove me completely wrong, but only time will tell. I think Damian Martinez was also a great add from the Pac-12, and they have a chance to be a pretty solid top 20 club this year. Now, 2.5 line, I think, is a very interesting one, as you can really go either way. Miami, though, visiting Gainesville is a little tougher. Florida is pretty tough at home in the Swamp. I kind of like Florida here, but I don't love this game. Moving on to another interesting line is Miami, Ohio, the MAC school at Northwestern. This is a 3-point line. This one is going to be a tight one, but a low-scoring one. It might hurt the eyes just a little bit to watch this game, as it should really be a defensive battle. But in that case scenario, a total of 39.5 has a real chance of going under. Quarterback play on either side is not going to be particularly great, and I don't hate if you want to go under 39.5 points in this game. Another game I like down the board is North Texas at South Alabama. I think this one should be a pretty fun one. Both offenses are capable of scoring 30 points, and South Alabama comes in at home as -5 favorites. And North Texas shouldn't be bad at all this year. It is a fun one, and at -5, I think this one could go really either way. And we have a couple more to talk about. Western Kentucky at number 5, Alabama. The new reign of coaching begins at Alabama, and they have Western Kentucky at -31.5. And I think it's a home run pick for Alabama. Western Kentucky losing their quarterback in Austin Reed. That's like all of their playmaking potential on offense, because they also lost Malachi Corley. Now, interestingly enough, they did bring in TJ Finley, who brought Texas State to a new level last year. And I think Western Kentucky, even with their losses, could be a decent sneaky team this year, but I don't think they're going to do anything crazy. But I think Alabama, their new coach, new coordinators, and revamped offense, revamped defense, I mean, they really overhauled the entire team with the Nick Saban leaving. And at 31.5, I think they're going to want to show their fans that they aren't done yet. Alabama is not done. They're just entering a new age, and I think the team is ready to go, and I think they're going to win by more than 31.5 points. Furman's going to be taking on number 6 Ole Miss, and Ole Miss is one of my favorite teams for this upcoming season. Opening at minus 42 is a little steep, and I do love Ole Miss. I think Jackson Dart is terrific. I think Trey Harris is going to have a monster season, and then there really shouldn't be too much drop off. Junkins obviously is a big loss, but Bentley and Diggs should be a decent running back duo with Parrish in there as really fast running back as well. I really like what they have. Watkins and Wells as well at the receiver, as well as a transfer, should end up being a pretty good player for them. Ended up having a decent 2022 season with 928 yards and 6 touchdowns. But really, what we want him to get back to is that 2021 season where he had 1,250 yards and 15 TDs. So I do like Ole Miss quite a bit. 42 might be a little steep for me, but I wouldn't hate it at all. Now we got UT Martin at Kansas State. Kansas State opening at minus 37. And one of my favorite abilities right here for Kansas State is going to be the rushing ability of Avery Johnson. Everyone was talking about him last year as a freshman. Good player, 6'2", 190. Got a good body. He should be able to carry the pile a little bit, and his rushing props are pretty steep in response to that. But I do like Kansas State here. UT Martin, not a whole lot of success, but minus 37, that is no number to scoff at. Kansas State might look pretty decent. Moving on to Tarleton State at Baylor. Now this one actually could go two different ways. So Baylor opens at minus 26.5. And I will say Baylor for sure if Gabalis, Tarleton State's QB, does not play. If he is in, I like Tarleton State to cover 26.5. Moving on to UNLV at Houston. This is one of the best games on the 6 o'clock window. This one should be a tight one. Houston opens minus 2.5. I think this one could go either way. UNLV was good last year. Houston was okay. But I think whatever way you go, it's going to be a nail biter. Excuse me. Now, probably the best game of the day coming in at 6:30 Central Time at Kyle Field, where College Game Day is going to be number 7 Notre Dame at number 20 Texas A&M. Now TAMU opens minus 3 and the over-under at 46.5. This should be a fight, a dog fight, an absolute defensive stand, and this one should be a phenomenal one to watch. Now, I don't hate either way, the +3 for Notre Dame, the -3 for Texas A&M. I think A&M is going to be a hard beat this year, and I don't love Notre Dame like ever, but Riley Leonard coming in to his first game at Notre Dame against his former coach, Mike Elko, I think A&M is going to have him schemed really well. So I do like that A&M -3. I always take the coach over the quarterback, so I'm going to go A&M. Now, a couple other fun ones in the late window. UCLA taking on Hawaii at 6:30. This is a -14 for UCLA. I like UCLA more after Hawaii wasn't phenomenal in their performance in week 0 against Delaware State, only winning 35-14 after being huge favorites. I still like Braden Shager, but he didn't throw the ball as effectively as I would have hoped. Another game I really think could be really fun in the late window is New Mexico, Arizona. And the reason I like this is because I think Arizona's offense could be so good this year. And minus 31 for Arizona against a team that just lost to an FCS team. I love Arizona in this spot. And I think they have two true Heisman candidates on that offense. I think Arizona goes nuclear and scores a ton of points, maybe even 50 plus in week one. And then we'll talk about the Sunday game, USC and LSU being played in Vegas at Allegiant Stadium. LSU at -4. I hammer that 100%. I think LSU is going to be fantastic. I love Newsmeyer. What he did in limited action last year, I think, was very impressive. And I don't think Miller Moss is going to be great off the bat. I still think LSU has the upper hand, and this really should be their game. Garrett Nussmeier, 600 yards, 4 touchdowns, and a pick in his little seasoning last year. Mainly highlighted by a ReliaQuest Bowl game where he threw for 395 yards and 3 touchdowns against Wisconsin. He also had a little seasoning against Alabama and Army, but nothing really to enough sample size besides that ReliaQuest game. And then Miller Moss, on the other hand, also had a phenomenal Holiday Bowl game against Louisville, where he went for 372 and 6 touchdowns against 1 pick. Now, Louisville did sit out some of their best players, and so did LSU. I think LSU has a really good opportunity here at -4. I think their defense is a lot better than what Louisville had last year. Harold Perkins should be after the quarterback, Major Burns in the secondary. I think this is a home run pick for LSU at -4. And then the final game to talk about is the Monday game, and that's Boston College taking on Florida State. Now, Florida State is in deep trouble if they lose this game, and I know their offense looked terrible, but at -16, Florida State, Mike Norvell has to come back after this embarrassing loss in Ireland against Georgia Tech. I like Florida State at -16 because I do not think that fan base would handle another loss to a bad team. So I think Florida State comes out there pumping, and I think maybe they can try to stretch the field a little bit against BC. That's all of the picks I have for NCAA football, baby. It's back week one. This one should be exciting, and I'll get you back with another episode later in the week. But we cannot wait for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday of college football. We are finally back in college football season, and let's get it rolling. Thank you all for tuning in. My name is Matthew Coughlin of the Jabroni Hour, and we'll see you next time.